Morning.
Morning, Howard. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear the whole story. I know bits and pieces from knowing
So
you.
am I.
So let's jump right in. I want to hear the background first of you as an athlete. Tell me
Uh-oh.
what your journey was like back as a kid when you started playing sports.
Okay. So I was born in 1967. I had an older brother that was really into sports, 6 years older than me. And that was my gateway. He's good basketball. He's just good all-around athlete, really into basketball. My dad, mom and dad, business owners, small town, North Central Montana, less than 10,000 people. My dad never threw a ball to me, never played catch with him, never did a thing, never even went fishing with him. All he ever did was work. Lower middle, I'd say like a lower middle class, blue collar community, right? So, it's live and die. It's a hard life.
Yeah.
Can't really blame him or anything. So it was really my brother, and he wasn't really the best mentor. No patience, no empathy, so on and so forth. But that's where I caught the bug. And growing up, when I grew up, 70s, high school in the 80s, graduated in 85, there was no AAU, there was no rec ball, there was no town travel, there was nothing.
Right.
Good thing about, and there, of course, we had, for TV, we had 2 channels from Spokane, Washington, and 4 channels from Canada. So a lot of curling, a lot of hockey, a lot of wrestling on TV. Sports, once like on Saturdays and Sundays, maybe one game. So not a lot of that. Good thing about that, though, is kids played a lot of sports. So that's one of the biggest differences between now. In high school, I lettered in 5 sports, and we played division, AA in Montana. That's like D1.
Yeah.
So, primary sports, football, baseball, basketball. And then I mix it up in the spring. So I also lettered in track, golf, and tennis as a freshman. And I mean, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if I've ever met a 5-sport athlete in high school. That's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And I skateboarded, and I skied, and I water skied. Sports left me a lot of time to develop my imagination. I ended up going to school, becoming a graphic designer, onward, creative director, all this kind of stuff. And I'll circle back to that in a minute. But and why I'm so big on sports is because of the foundational skills it gets you to succeed in life,
Sure.
Teamwork and all that other kind of thing. Anyway, so I had none of that, support coming through my development years.
Yeah.
Most of my friends' dads were coaches, but I never caught in with that. They'd be like at varsity practices and stuff, doing whatever on the sidelines, being exposed to it. I had none of that. Went to a couple of camps in high school at our local community college, and then ended up going to one at Washington State one year because I was actually looking at playing football out there. And that was actually kind of an eye-opener. Played against a guy who went on to the NBA. Some really, really good talent, real big eye opener to me because I never really left Montana.
Right.
Anyway, so that was kind of the journey. I guess I was, I had football scholarships, not I had like D3 basketball scholarship offers, but because my sister had her boyfriend in college played at the University of Idaho and blew his knee out his first year. And I knew how tough it was and hard. And the fact that they wanted to put 40 pounds on me to play football in college, steroids and I just, I had other plans.
Sure.
For that. So that was kind of, and then I think that this is kind of an important thing because I was 5'7.5" and 105 pounds when I was a freshman.
Wow.
And so like in 7th grade, because that's when we started playing organized sports, 7th and 8th grade, I was power forward or whatever the heck is on a 7th grade team, one of the taller kids, but I was a late bloomer and I was a year behind everybody.
Okay.
So I graduated when I was 17. So I developed late. So freshman year, and so I had 2 years, 8th grade and freshman year, where I wasn't growing like everybody else. I wasn't maturing. I wasn't developing. I had zero skill development. It was just playing in the driveway or playing pickup games with my friends. And you'd only play basketball in the season because in the spring and summer you played baseball. Fall you played football.
Yeah.
So there was no development. Anyway, I went from 5'7.5" to 6'1.5" between freshman and sophomore year. 12 kids on the team freshman year. I was playing point guard. I was the 11th guy. Okay. I had a big chip on my shoulder. It didn't affect me in football and the other sports, but in basketball, the height and the lack of maturity affected me. Sophomore year, 6'1.5", May JV started. And back then we had a freshman team, sophomore team, JV team, senior team. So I transferred out when I was a junior to a bigger school. So from a school of 400 students to a school of 1,500 within our same conference. They had, and I saw there was an opportunity. They had a good basketball team. Their starting team was set, and I had to come in and I had to fight for, because I sophomore, junior year did really well. Made varsity junior year, so on and so forth. But I had to fight to get a starting spot, which I did, and we won the state championship.
Nice.
So that's when it all came together for me, is because for the first time ever, I had a good coach that wasn't political like they were in the small town I came from, a coach who played in college. He was just a fair guy. He was a star. He actually played against UCLA back in the early 70s, played a game where they are undefeated in the NCAA tournament, opening round, University of Montana versus UCLA. And my coach scored 32 points, at 12 rebounds and 10 assists.
Wow.
And UCLA hadn't lost a game in 2 years.
Right. That was the John Wooden.
So that's the kind of guy, who is really inspirational.
Yeah.
It's like the David versus Goliath thing. And that was something that I kind of drafted on, because he's like the first guy. Like, my dad wasn't a coach, so I wasn't in that, social group in my small town. But the first coach who was really like, helped me and basically, on your own, it was a meritocracy for the first time ever.
Right.
I really responded to that. And like the lessons I learned, because we lost our first 3 or 4 games senior year, because we were gelling. I was the new guy trying to figure it all out. But what's important is how you come together and how you finish.
Yeah.
Right. At the end of the season, we're the best team in the state.
Nice.
So I learned so much from that.
Yeah.
Because then coming out of Montana back then, before it's fabulous, and I went to University of Montana, University of Oregon, graduated from University of Arizona, but I had no way out and I had no money. I had to get scholarships. So I was always the underdog. So I really leveraged that chip on my shoulder thing. Yeah. Never allowed to take art classes in high school. In college, open elective, end of my freshman year, jumped in. I mean, I became a creative director and a designer.
Right.
But I knew I had to work harder than everybody else. Everybody else had the breaks. I had to be focused. I had to set goals. I had to work towards it. I had to work with people. And that was one of the things I learned, is like the team thing, super important, and if you're the leader on the team, then you do anything, you fill in the gaps, sure. Right? You don't have to be the best. You just have to be able to lead and organize. So that's a big thing that I got out of sports that I really try to teach kids. And it's not easy, but it's really, to me, it's not really about if you win or lose, how many points you score. It's about what lessons do you learn? Do you set goals? Do you work towards them? Are you coachable? Do you listen? Do you have a bad attitude? Do you work with your team? Do you clap it up? Are you excited when your teammate does something good? And I always tell kids, like, my favorite thing is assists, not scoring. To make the pass, to set the other kid up, to make us, to score a basket. That's right. That's the most fun, because you're a part of that too. You hook them up, you help them. And as you know, when teams start to play that way and think that way, it's a game changer.
Right. That's cool. So that kind of bridges right into coaching then. Like, I know you had kids that played basketball, played some multiple sports, but how did you get started with coaching, and kind of where's that taking you now? Okay, that's an interesting story, because I go to college. I play a lot of basketball in college. It's another good thing about it. It's healthy, it's fun. But when I graduated from college, because I lived in the art world and there's not a lot of sports fans, and most of my friends never played any sports. Sure. And it was so intense. After college, I just completely got away from it. Sports. I just completely immersed myself in this other world, my professional world, and focus, and worked really, really hard. So, I mean, I was out of it for 15, 20. I didn't even watch a game. I had no idea what was going on, but it was like a self-inflicted isolation. I just felt like it was a huge distraction. Sure. And also living in big cities like Seattle and Philly and Los Angeles. I mean, they're big sports town cities, and it can be really distracting. But
So the thing that got me back into it was my kids.
Okay.
And, what happened is I got him involved in the YMCA. We were living in Ventura, California, about 60 miles north of Los Angeles, and primarily Hispanic area. And just a lot of different classes of social classes of people, socioeconomic classes.
Sure.
And I got my kids involved in the YMCA at a younger age, and very different from the scene out here. A lot of the programs for youth run through the YMCA.
Yeah.
And in California, there's a lot of homeschooled kids, and they have to take a physical education class or course. So you get a lot of the homeschool kids in the YMCA. The YMCA provides like a lot of support for single parent families. So you end up with a lot of kids through that. They have to take PE related things. And then you also end up with special needs kids, and after school programs. So it started for me because my daughter was a fifth grader, and she's tall. And I always wanted to be a ballerina, a gymnast, I don't know, stuff that she wasn't really built for.
Okay.
And I was always nudging her. So I basically made her play basketball when she's in fifth grade. And so she had to play on a co-ed team, fifth through eighth graders. She is the only girl on the team. She hated that. What was good about that is my daughter's also really stubborn and competitive. So she wanted to prove that she was better than the boys. And she did really well. And so my son, who is 5, 6 years old then, and I would go to the practices and we'd play next to each other. So it's also important to mention that all I ever did was work. I never really did much with my kids. I mean, I played catch with them and stuff, but I wasn't engaged. Never wanted to be a coach, none of that kind of stuff. Anyway, I got invited to come and scrimmage with the older kids. And then I got invited to coach. And at the YMCA, they're always, recruiting coaches. So the next thing I know, I'm coaching my son's sixth grade team and, co-coaching my daughter's team and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But I learned so much from that. And I also helped start the flag football program at the YMCA and a lacrosse program there too. And I just realized how much kids need this. They need that structure, especially the kids, single parents.
Yeah.
They've got challenges, right? If they're, special needs, the homeschooled kids who aren't very well socialized,
Yeah.
And it was just such an eye opener to me. It's something that I never thought that I would be able to help and contribute. And it was pretty contagious. And then I started kind of coaching everything. And then I don't even think I'm a good coach. I just knew like some of the coaches that they have, a lot of the coaches that they have never played the sports. And I could just see, that wasn't right. Or, it's like, they're not getting good skills, from this other person. Not that I was I just thought I could do a better job.
Sure.
So that's what I did. And then you start getting feedback from the parents, and it just kind of worked. So when we moved out here, I guess it was almost 8 years ago, again, coming back to sports, we moved out here during winter break, and I dropped my kids into the Spartans winter break camp, playing basketball, making instantaneous friends, because I knew there'd be kids that they're going to school with. And, my son is really shy. My daughter's not as shy. So I had them lined up with several things. Journeyman, New Hampshire, I guess it was Northeast Elite then, Spartans.
Yeah.
We had my son played Spartans, my daughter Northeast Elite. That's kind of how that all really worked out. And for my son in particular, he plays other sports too, but that was really important because he's such a shy kid. But one of the things, getting back to the coaching is I've realized just for my own journey and from watching kids is the confidence thing, I think, is probably the most important thing that you can help, kids with positive reinforcement and direction and all those kind of things. But that's probably one of the most important things that they can come away from this with. Confidence.
I'm interested now in hearing kind of the contrast, I guess, that I'm hearing from what you experienced as like your brother, you said, was not a great mentor, did not have a lot of positive reinforcement, and then you kind of coming to the conclusion of the importance of that, in coaching yourself. Like, how did that difference or that disparity kind of play out in your mind?
Well, it's
value of that.
Okay, it's hard, thinking back about when I was in my younger years with my older brother, because I didn't have any context or perspective.
Yeah.
It's just the kind of, and it was kind of like a bullying kind of a thing. He was forcing me to do some things when I wasn't really quite ready. And, was all about trying to be the best. And I had a negative reaction to that, I would say.
Yeah.
And I, that's one of the things that you can't do with it. It doesn't work with kids, sticks and carrots don't really work.
Yeah.
The thing that I think is the most important with the kid is to be coachable and to be open to it. And sometimes, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, and you've seen it too, but sometimes you'll have a really skilled kid. And I'm talking about the younger, I'm not talking about high school kids. I'm talking about younger kids, but a kid that has more, way more skill than the other kids, but the attitude is not good. And it's poison, and then they try to get the other, a couple of, they're pretty influential. So maybe there's a couple of other kids they influence, and then they start messing around, and it's terrible. It's a terrible situation. And I've actually gotten to the point where, there's some kids that I don't invite to train, not because they don't have the skill level, but because it's not conducive to the whole group, and along with that too, is the kind of teasing, oh, so-and-so can't make a shot. That's not what the kids are there for. So-and-so can't dribble, laughing when they dribble off. It's like every kid's got to have a chance. You got to show them the path. Right. And so I always start out with just like the fundamentals and trying to make it fun, especially for kids, girls, because I coach boys and girls. Girls is an even bigger challenge out here. We don't have, at least in this community, we don't have the kind of girls basketball heritage that we do where I came from. Where I came from, girls basketball is probably more popular than boys basketball. It's like the biggest thing. Every kid, every young girl plays girls basketball. The town I came from, they won the state championship. They're in Division A now, 5 out of the last 6 years. Every kid plays. And I think that that's so important for the kids to see that.
Yeah.
And out here you have these, I guess they're turning around a little bit, but you had a pretty long, consistent era where the girls team would maybe win a couple of games a year.
Right.
And nobody wants to play basketball.
Yeah.
I just think that that's such a shame. So you got to start with, like that positive reinforcement, that encouragement. The dribbling is fun. Like, you show them it's, me, 55-year-old guy, right? A grandpa basically to them. I'm not relatable.
Sure.
But I share with them videos of younger girls that are doing these things and being like, hey, it's kind of like gymnastics. It's fun. You just go out in your driveway, go in your basement, and as you know, too, it's like, dribbling is not an easy skill, but that's the core foundational skill of basketball.
Sure.
So you start with like that low bar, not that it's easy to become a good dribbler. And then you build from that. And they got to have some confidence because, too, it's like a girl or a boy that can't dribble. They get the ball in the court. They just freeze up. They have zero confidence. You can't do anything unless you have confidence. Yeah. Confidence comes from handling the ball. Right.
Yeah.
But again, it goes back to, and they don't get this now, even though I tell them this, like when you're looking for a job, you think it's hard to make the JV team now, when there's 15 spots on it. Well, wait till you get in the real world and there's a job and there's one spot.
Sure.
And 500 people applying for that. It's like the world's competitive.
Yeah.
So get used to that. Put the work in.
Yeah.
I always teach the kids to like, first day of practice, we just kind of talk about goals. By the second or third, they're giving me their goals just for that session or that season.
Yeah.
And then because it's like, you got to set the goal, and then you have realistic goals like, hey, we want to win more games than we lose. And then you have ones that are more aspirational, like I want to, be first team All-State or whatever the equivalency of that is at their level. Sure. Right. But you got to have a plan to get there.
Yeah.
You don't just wake up and it happens. Okay, so now how do we get there? Here's your goal, what you want to do, but you're going to need to put some work in.
Yeah.
And you're going to need to be open to that feedback.
Right.
And then it's really up to you. You're accountable. Mom isn't accountable, or dad, or big sister, it's you.
Yeah, I think there's a really big value in just making tangible goals out of, the kids kind of have that big ambiguous dream kind of thing. Yeah, I want to play basketball at a high level, but they don't really have a way to break it down to like, what am I doing today, this week, this season to actually move that forward? So I think that's...
Yeah, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this, but I think too that having realistic and achievable goals that are your own goals are super important, not ones that are fostered upon you by an AAU coach.
Totally.
Giving you a false sense of hope. And that's a whole other thing that
I
think can be pretty toxic.
Yeah. I often talk about with parents, the pull versus push aspect makes a huge difference to me. Like if the player, is pulling from us, they want to do more and they're reaching for the next goal versus, like you said, a coach or a parent can be totally pushing, what the goal should be onto the player and trying to force their motivation, which just doesn't work. So like I'm interviewing a player that we're going to work with one-on-one, that makes a completely different relationship if the player is hungry and like ready to soak up more knowledge and trying to achieve something that they're self-motivated toward.
Yeah, and one of the things I see all the time, and I'm running a couple of groups this summer, girls, younger girls, well, 5, 6, and 7, 8. But I see this all the time. They get the ball, and again, it goes back to a life lesson, right? They're kind of out, 10 feet from the basket, 15 feet from the basket. They get the ball, they're kind of not squared up to the basket, and then they just kick it back out. And I'm like, and I'll show them, I'm like, okay, get the ball, make it go. You have an open line, but you got to try. I mean, I don't care if you miss it. I care if you don't try. And then the next time around, same scenario, and they attack and they score. And then all of a sudden you just see it's like a light goes off.
Yeah.
You don't get anywhere if you don't try.
Right.
You got to put the effort in. You can't just be scared.
Right.
And that other thing too is they're so peer influenced, like kind of looking around to see what the other girls, how they answer a question or what they're doing. Or, I mean, I even remember, my daughter talking about, and this was even in high school, freshman year, girls saying like, if they're doing a drill, like, well, if you don't try to steal the ball from me, I won't try to steal it from you.
Right.
Or just don't try to block my shot when I shoot, and then I won't try to block your shot when, it's like, what's the point?
Right. Yeah, like there's definitely that aspect I've talked about with parents a lot on the I guess it's even more so for girls, kind of like you're describing, but they're kind of trained their whole life to be polite and be nice human beings and like all this, and then we put them in the sports scenario, it's like none of those rules apply anymore. It's like kill. And they're like
friends after. Yeah, well, sportsmanship,
yeah,
but it's
sportsmanship, but trying to flip that switch to be an aggressive competitor as a female athlete, I think is definitely a challenge for coaches and parents and the player themselves to navigate. Like how do I relate that? And I think to some extent it helps to just start earlier. And I think like you talked about with your daughter, when Hazel's playing co-ed with the boys, she kind of gets into that mode of like, all right, this is how the boys are competing, and she can adopt that and translate it in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And one other thing I just want to circle back on really quickly, just kind of thinking about my forming years and older brother, and knowing a lot of the kids he played high school with or ball with, is that I'm going to say kind of almost unequivocally that the kids that had the dads that were coaches, or the parents that were coaches, that were the push-pull thing, where it was the parents were really pushing, the parents were having meetings with the coaches, really pushing the kids really good, getting honors, getting scholarships. I know way more kids in those scenarios that ended up going to college, maybe playing for a year, quitting school, because it was never their idea.
Right.
Like really talented kids. And when they finally got to make their own decisions, they're like, I never wanted this.
Right.
And I did this when I was a little kid. It was, Todd Marinovich is like the world-class example of bad parenting, right? We all know that story, but yeah, it happens all the time. So that's the other kind of a key thing too, BJ, the kids got to want it. And it's not for everybody. And I have kids that, they're okay. And it's kind of like, after 6th grade, it's like, are they going to play next year? They're like, she doesn't really want to. Sure. I'm like, great, then don't.
Yeah.
Don't. It really needs to be their decision.
Right.
They have to have they've got to want it, because I'm not going to, at our level, we don't do rec, but, I have an expectation too. I'm going to push them. I'm going to push them to challenge themselves and to get better. They're there to get better, not to get worse, and not just to socialize.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important aspect to navigate too. I think there's really two ends of the spectrum where people are like, yeah, I'm here to socialize and play rec with my friends, or, my parents pushing me to be on the elite team, 4 seasons a year until I flame out at age 13. I think the timeline you're talking about has accelerated, I think, in recent years, where kids are quitting, age 13 is kind of the threshold that all the statistics shows. Like kids are quitting right there before they really go to high school, and probably could have their most enjoyable time because they've been pushed too hard up to that point. It's just like, I'm done. I'm not having any fun anymore. I'm not seeing any results from all this work I'm putting in. And so, I'd rather go do something else. So,
right. Well,
That's actually a really good point, because it might not just be that they're quitting, so to speak, but nowadays kids play sports all year round. And it might just be like, if at age 13, kind of when you're, looking at high school, eighth grade, freshman year, whatever, kids are forced to make this crazy decision. I mean, I know my son did with like lacrosse, and it's like to keep up with the Jones, so to speak, and with all this like year-round training, and like the kids are getting better. I think some of the kids that we both know, I mean, they're in ninth grade and their skill set and their focus and their basketball IQ and maturity is kind of off the charts for a 15-year-old kid, right?
Right.
It's pretty hard to compete with if you're a three-sport athlete. And I know a few kids that are three-sport athletes, but they're not great at any of those sports.
Sure.
Not on the top tier, because if they were going to be, they would probably have to drop one or maybe more sports.
Right.
And that's where I think it's because you know a lot more about this than me, but I think that cross training is super important for kids, both mentally and physically.
Yeah, so I mean, the more and more, like, listen to podcasts recently, there's a lot of interviewers that take the same tack if they're interviewing a college coach. It's like, who would you take, a single sport or a multi-sport athlete? And it's like 100% all the college coaches would recruit the multi-sport athlete, assuming all else equal. And I think parents, I think there's kind of a trend to circling back toward that, where it was very hardcore, everybody's going specialization. At age 9, you need to pick your sport that you're going to play for the rest of your life. And so, I think some of that's trickling back to parents. They're like, no, we're going to keep it a little more low key. Maybe we'll do some light training or something year round, but we're going to take a season off to do different things. And I think there really is a huge benefit to having that cross discipline, athletic as well as mental training, and just having a break from, the same sport 4 seasons a year, which can really catch up to players faster than you think and get them to the point of burning out and quitting. Because
physically too. I mean, you've read those reports too, where, the NBA scouts are saying they get these 19-year-old wonder kids in, but their bodies are like the body of a guy that's been playing in the NBA for 12 years.
Right.
Because they are on this rigorous AAU like circuit and schedule. And I mean, all those hops, like I can't even, I got a bad back. I can't even jump anymore. But you know what I'm talking about. I mean, it happened to my nephew, who is just focused on basketball. Like that's all he did. He had a trainer from when he was in 4th grade, personal trainer. And he was shot by the time he was a junior.
Wow.
Dual ankle surgeries, bad knees. I mean, it's just all that repetitive, doing the same kind of stuff, same kind of body movements, not playing any other sports, getting that, CrossFit conditioning in.
Yeah, that's a lot of impact. And, there's more and more people talking about the equivalent of the NBA schedule. They'll play one game and have a 24-hour break before they play another game. And AAU tournaments, you might play 8 games in a 24-hour period. And it's really taking a huge toll physically on the kids, like you're saying.
Well, that's why, I don't know if we're going to talk about this, but, I operate primarily where I coach at the town travel level, which I think is the best.
Yeah.
AAU's on it's a whole other thing.
Right.
Whole other thing. And then rec is, of course, not challenging enough for the more skilled kids.
Yeah.
And they cater to the lowest common denominator, and they end up with some really bad dad coaches.
Say that again. Sorry.
I said they cater to the lowest common denominator. That's a
Right.
big frustration for the kids with more skills, and you end up with some pretty poor coaching.
Right.
And it's not fun to win a game by 40 points, and it's not fun to lose a game by 40 points. There's no benefit when you're a kid.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of need for that. I call it like the bridge category, between rec and AAU. Is one parent actually described it as 5 levels up, right? It's not one level, where I'd kind of think about it like, rec, travel, AAU. They're like, no, actually we went from rec, we tried AAU, and it was like 6 levels too high for us, and we needed something in between. And, I think programs like you're running, programs like Journeyman, I think is another example that really fits that, where it's like, there's a way to progress forward without the highest level of, competitive pressure. So you're still able to make some mistakes and figure stuff out and grow a little bit. But it's not, at the lowest common denominator, like you said, at the rec level, where it's, it's pretty easy to progress as a player to where the rec level is boring and not very useful for you anymore. So
Yeah, exactly. So
I'd love to hear more about more about what you have going on, really what your vision's like for the Exeter youth basketball travel that you've been working with. How many years have you been involved there now?
5.
5
We're
years.
heading into our 5th year. Yeah. And that one of the things okay, I'll just tell you a little bit about why we started is because, we're in Exeter, SAU 16, there's 6 different towns that make up Exeter. And I co-founded it with Scott McClure, and, he's got a son a year younger than my son, and they played together in rec programs and also in AAU. And we just kind of looked around and, like we just talked about, like, the spectrum between rec and AAU, it's 5 levels or whatever. There's nothing in between. And you can imagine, Cole and Huxley on the same rec team.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a team when we played for Kensington, where the coach loaded up as Kensington, but he brought in a couple of extra kids, that are really good, that played varsity as freshmen at the high school. We beat Hampton one time by 80 points, and that the whole second half we're just trying to get the ball to Billy, the worst kid on the team.
Yeah.
And then when Cole and Huxley played together, the year after that, I mean, we were beating everybody by 40 or 50. It was just ridiculous.
Right.
There's nothing in between.
Yeah.
And because we played AAU and we knew, like, some of the towns around here that have really good players and really good high school programs, Bedford being a classic example, Londonderry, they all have robust town travel programs, and it's really, really great. And then we were getting in trouble in rec because we were too good. Well, that's not fair to our kids.
Right.
Just because they can score and they can shoot and stuff, what they're supposed to sit on the bench for 3 quarters or not play hard or not try to score.
Right.
So we just really thought it was, and rec is fine. There's a certain kid that rec is good for, and even some of the kids on the bubble, we encourage that, and we support the town travel or the town rec programs.
Yeah.
We end early for our younger groups so that the kids can go play for their town team if they want to, if they're playing in tournaments, whatever.
Sure.
But we just thought, like, bringing in some better exposure, and we also, are able to point some of the kids and parents that are, maybe a little more skilled, want a little more challenge, 2 different AAU programs, 2 different trainers.
Yeah.
Because parents talk a lot. And so Scott and I think we just found that we had a wealth of knowledge because we were so looking for the better competition, the better coaching. That's how we found you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Integrity Hoops and all that. And then we latched onto it because I think we're also humble enough to understand, like, there's people out there that are going to do this a lot better than us.
Sure.
That are going to be good mentors, that are going to be like, going into one of your things, it's like, hey, it's all, and that's the way I am too. It's like, I get an hour and a half, for a session. We're going to be focused on basketball.
Yeah.
And we've got to accomplish a few things here. We don't have time to mess around. We don't have time for not to be focused. We're going to get to business. We're still going to have fun and learn, but
Right.
you need that. So we just felt like we had this wealth of knowledge, and we also wanted to play some of those other teams, which we knew we would lose to, but we wanted to get better.
Yeah.
That's how we started it. And by our second year, and this was really pivotal we never set out to build this thing for the whole community. It was really about, like, getting our kids a place that was, too early for AAU. And back then nobody was playing winter AAU.
Mm-hmm.
They still shouldn't be. I mean, that was kind of a COVID deal.
Yeah.
They're, kind of latched onto it, meaning the AAU programs. But we had a lot of success. We got better and people really loved it. And because our kids were different ages, and, there's usually a 5-6 category in town travel. There's a 7-8 category. There's a 3-4 category, but there isn't really a 7th grade division or an 8th grade division. Certainly not for girls, sometimes for boys.
Right.
So then the next year, we're like, okay, we had a hybrid team, 5th and 6th graders, and we just cobbled it together. Excuse me. Then by the next year, we just decided, like, do we want to have one kind of super team? Because there's some really good players that were in that class of 2027, as you know.
Yeah.
But then we also found out that, like, there's some good players in the area that weren't playing for us because we had such a select team. We didn't know if it was going to work. But by the time we beat those teams by 40 points, they all wanted to come play for us. And then Scott and I knew, like, okay, well, we didn't have to have tryouts. We can just pick teams. So we decided to have, a 6th grade and a 7th grade team the next year. Anyway, long story short, that was the year of COVID.
Yeah.
And when COVID hit, and that was a huge eye opener. And we were basically the only game in town, so to speak. All the gyms are shut down. All the programs are shut down. Like my son would have been eligible to play at CMS, but they didn't have a basketball program because of COVID. I mean, literally, these kids are at home all day long in front of their computers, no rec time, not seeing friends.
Yeah.
We found a way. We went down to Hampton Sports Barn. We found a way. Scott and I found a way. Journeyman shut down. They got kicked out of their gym. We were literally the only thing, and the kids played.
Yeah.
We're not political. We follow whatever the rules are. We have to, because we also have liability insurance, right?
Right.
And we found a way to play and have a great season. And it was such a big thing for these kids, because you can imagine, we're talking 12 and 13-year-old kids who, like I just said, under home arrest all day long.
Yeah.
And twice a week, they get to come in here with us, and then games on the weekend, and just let it out. It was hard though, too, because there was a tremendous amount of energy. But that was such a great thing for the community, for the families, and obviously for the kids. And that's also when we just said, like, okay, because we're not a government related organization, we're not community, or we're not part of the township or anything like that. The rec program also got shut down. So we can operate autonomously.
Yeah.
And as long as we can find a court and we follow whatever the state rules are, we can play, and we will find a way to play, because it's important for these kids.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to happen again. That's kind of how we saw it.
Hmm.
So let's get it set up, because if it happens again, there's going to be even more kids, that are going to be, disenfranchised by all of this stuff.
Right.
Plus, we had other people in the community going like, hey, do you have a girls program? Hey, my son's going to be in 5th grade, and we didn't have that. Are you going to have a program? So it kind of grew from that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gotten pretty good. I mean, we don't, we have, a baseline that the kids have to meet skill wise, because, there's other places for the kids to play. And we're really upfront about that. It's like, hey, you know what? We want to set every kid up to succeed. Thin slicing, you have to kind of assess their potential, their level of interest, their, maturity, their coachability, all those kinds of things. It's not for everybody.
Sure.
And we're not catering to the lowest common denominator, so for some kids, we're like, hey, you know what? You might be better served looking over here. Develop your skills. Here's some trainers. If you want some one-on-one stuff or some small group training, go talk to there's some really great trainers out there and organizations that you can join to get that level up. You're in 5th grade. We're not going to completely shut the door on you.
Sure.
We're going to encourage you, but you have to get that skill level up to a baseline.
Yeah.
What
do you guys do as far as evaluation? Like, how do you go about really grading players and kind of drawing that line, like you said, the thin slicing?
Most of the kids we know, I mean, for our legacy teams, we know every kid in the area.
Yeah.
So we have a pretty good idea. Like, all of the better players have all played for us. There might be a couple outliers there, but they've already been identified. We invite them when we do clinics and things like that. We invite people from the community. And then, that's one of the ways that we find the younger kids who aren't involved is, and this is why I ceded my presidency of this group, because I'm too old. We find parents, coaches that have a good background, that are good, good coaches that have younger families.
Yeah.
In order to help, satisfy that pipeline, because they I don't know the kids in 2nd grade now that in 3 years are going to be playing for us.
Right.
My 6th grade coach does, because he's got a 2nd grader, and he's got a 4th grader, and he's got a 6th grader.
Right.
So I think that really helps. And the other thing too is this has been really important for us, and it's very different from some of the other programs you've named, is we don't have a figurehead. This is community-based, community-funded, community-organized. It's not Howard Brown or Scott McClure's thing. We set it up because we had the passion, obviously, the drive. We cared about all these kids. It's the least we can do. We're not educators. But it's really up to the community to keep it going.
Yeah.
It's like, and I tell it to parents all the time now. It's like, well, were we going to have a 5th grade girls team? I'm like, I don't know. Are you going to go out and recruit? I don't know who those kids are. Bring them in. I'll run the clinics. I'll set it up. I'll get the gym time. I'll bring in the coaches. But you got to do the recruiting. You got to build the team. So we did a thing this summer that I'm doing, because I'm really focused on girls now. I kind of ended up coaching the teams nobody else wants to coach. That sounds kind of mean, because I know parents are really overextended. I know some parents, and there are single, parent households, 3 kids, they don't have any time.
Right.
but so girls has been a real challenge for reasons that I've already cited. It's really hard to build the girls, and there's other stuff like field hockey is a really big deal here, and
Sure.
soccer for girls is huge. So there's not a lot of girls playing basketball in the fall because they play soccer. So I went to the parents, and I'm just, so I coached a boys fifth grade. It was like a fifth grade B team last year. And then I coached the girls fifth and sixth grade team, and just helped out some of the other teams too, and ran practices and skills for them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because really, like, my best, like I'm not some super coach. I'm always looking for better coaches. I'm not a development coach, and we've got some people that are really, really good at that. So, hey, I'll shag balls, I'll rebound, I'll do whatever I can just to keep the thing going. But I'm always looking to get better coaches involved in the whole thing, and more participation. So anyway, so I had the parents pull together the groups, because, our sixth grade team, right? The sixth graders are now going to be seventh, eighth graders, and the fifth graders are now 5, 6, right? And I had 5 of each. I like to have 10 kids, just so you can scrimmage and stuff like that. So we got to find some, and not everybody's coming back. So we got to flesh out those ranks. So I put the challenge to the parents, and I said, I'll set up a summer training program. You guys got to do the recruiting.
Yeah.
It was actually a really interesting experiment, because one of some of the feedback I got from last winter from the parents, and think about girls in 5th and 6th grade. You train them, right? Like psychologically, physically, mentally, very different. You're talking about middle schoolers versus elementary schoolers.
Yeah.
And they get lumped into this group. It's almost like the Europeans, carving up, Africa, not along cultural lines, but along geographic, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Math thing, but the Tutus and the Sunnis and whatever. It's like they don't mix. So the older girls were complaining about the younger girls, basically.
Yeah.
And saying that they're bringing them down. I'm talking about kind of like the parents, like not in a negative way, but it's pretty obvious.
Sure.
Anyways, the point is we brought in a few 8th graders, the parents did, with the 7th graders, and they play so much more better in that right sort of social context, with more parity.
Yeah.
And then now I'm seeing like these girls who are 6th graders showing a little more leadership with the 5th graders, but I can see, just because I go from one to the other, how different they are psychologically, and how they respond differently to the different kinds of drills and training, and how it's actually so much better for these girls to have that kind of, mental, psychological parity with training. And then I'm going to have to come back this winter. I'm going to have the same kind of problem. I think it's more so at the 5th and 6th than the 7th and 8th grade girls. Yeah. But anyway, so that whole strategy has worked. And the other thing I did too is the older girls go an hour and a half inside a gym at Talbot, and the younger girls are outside at Lincoln Street.
Okay.
So they're outdoors. It's, there's monkey bars over there, because I know that there's some little brothers and sisters, and the parents come, they got to keep them busy.
Yeah.
And I also brought in the 2 biggest stars from the high school girls program to help coach, because the girls look up to them so much. And even getting them out there to like scrimmage with them, it has been such a good thing, because I'm a 55-year-old grandpa. I'm not a grandpa, but you get what I'm saying. I'm not relatable to them at all. It's got to be relatable. And I'm just hoping that it starts with having fun.
Yeah.
Building, cementing friendships, building friendships, making more friends. And when you have that right mix in your soup, then you can start thinking about the skill.
Yeah.
Like those are really the 3 core pillars that I'm finding to be successful. I'm not talking about the boys are totally different.
Yeah.
It's a whole other animal. But I'm talking about with the girls, to try to lift that whole, sea level for them, and get higher numbers, get the participation up.
No, I think that's great. That certainly aligns with what I found too. Like as soon as you have the fun factor and the social dynamics and the positive reinforcement side that you've been talking about, as well as making it, just age appropriate, skill level appropriate to what you're working on. Because I think a lot of coaches, just go with the same approach they would with the boys, or even with the high school boys team that they maybe coached in the past, or, the last time they played. They have that same mentality, like this 5th grade girls team is going to run this offense, and we're going to do this. And the girls are just, overwhelmed, and then everybody's frustrated on both coaches and players side, and I think that's where a lot of girls just leave, like, basketball is not for me. Coach was a jerk and it wasn't any fun, and there's a lot of problems that I think are going on with just that mismatch of expectations, you could even say, of coaches and what they're going to accomplish with the younger age group girls.
I think that's a really great point, BJ, because one of the things I didn't mention for why I'm so committed to girls in particular with our program is because I know when I moved out here, if we would have had this program, or if there's a program like this, my son was fine, but my daughter would have thrived in it. Because the mistake I made instead is I put my daughter in a very competitive AAU program, and she is in a very competitive one in California.
Yeah.
But the difference is in California, the dad coaches who ran it, who were actually good coaches, their daughters played and they had other kids.
Yeah.
But when I brought them out here, the program I put my daughter in had a really good coach. I think you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Single guy in his mid-20s, had no idea how to relate to teenage girls. None. And he was a jerk to them. He thought it was all about, like, he would literally make them roll around on the ground fighting for loose balls until their knees were bloody. He would force them to scrimmage with the boys.
Yeah.
And then he'd be calling them out and humiliating them in front of the boys, teasing them, giving them nicknames. It ruined it for my daughter. So I put her through this I forced her, like, I'm that bad dad. I forced her, and then by the time she got to high school, she just threw it all out. She was just done.
Sure.
She didn't try. You know what I mean? She was just, it wasn't fun for her. It was just about socializing. Okay.
Yeah.
And all that. And here's another thing too, is because my daughter trained with you and we had her working on her shot, right? She gets into high school. There's a coach there, throws the book out on how to shoot. And he's got this really specific way to shoot, different from what you taught and everybody else had taught her. And that totally screws her up. And she's not going to put in the time to get it right. And he's forcing everybody to shoot this one way. And I'll tell you, I know from high school boys, which my son's playing now, when you get to high school and even with like the top, the good AAU programs, nobody is changing your shot. Your shot is your shot.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody's got a slight tweak to it. I mean, there's like a hitch you can work out or something like that. If that's a problem, using your legs, get more arc, whatever, but nobody is fixing your shot.
Yeah. Nobody's starting from scratch, at least, right? It's kind of
they might be, but they're not going to spend that time on it. It's kind of up to you. But to have this like dogmatic approach where like everybody has to shoot the exact same way and it's my way. Yeah. An orthodox way.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to get a lot of players to quit quickly, I think.
Well, they did.
Yeah.
They did. Well, an incredibly talented class of girls. They had 4 of them on varsity as freshmen that were good.
Yeah.
One started and they all basically gave up. And they all had that same coach that I mentioned too, like when they're in middle school.
Wow.
It wasn't fun.
Yeah. No, I think it's a big factor for girls. Like, they're going to have success. And I think they're usually starting, in my experience, like a couple of years later. Like you mentioned 5th grade, like a lot of girls, like first touch of a basketball in a team environment is in 5th grade, where boys are like more likely to do it 2nd, 3rd grade. And so like they're coming into it, completely raw with no skill or experience. And again, I think the coach's expectations are just often a mismatch for what's possible there. And they need that. They need the fun. They need the social environment, and they need some realistic expectations, like you said. So I'm really excited to hear that you are taking on the challenge of kind of reinventing how to approach the younger age girls groups. I think it's very much needed.
Well, it's all trial and error. Well, the other thing I want to it just made me think about, like, when we were in California, 3rd and 4th grade girls play on an 8-foot hoop.
Yeah.
For a 3rd grade girl to make a 10-foot shot.
Yeah.
What good is that doing them? And also the boys play on an 8-foot hoop all the way through 3rd grade.
Yeah.
I think it should be 4th grade, but what good is that doing them? Then they develop all this, and you'll see that a lot at our level, this weird twist, because they want to shoot threes. Right. I just tell them flat out, nobody's shooting threes.
Yeah.
Taking shots we can make. The closer the better. Like, that's one of my orthodoxies. Like, I don't give up on. Like, let's work on making the higher percentage shots, which are still a challenge, before we worry about jacking up a 3.
Yeah.
Contorting your body and then ending up shooting like this all the way through high school or whatever.
Yeah. I've kind of become an ambassador for that, for the lowered rim. And what I do actually is scale the 3-point line smaller, so that it's 15 feet 3-point line with the 8-foot hoop, and then it's actually doable with, the strength that they have. And then they learn spacing concepts and all that, stuff we learned from Noah with the Integrity Hoops program, like just scale the court to the size of the humans, and like they're able to score more points and have spacing concepts and a lot of other stuff.
Build confidence.
Yeah, build confidence, and then have consistent shooting technique. Like one of the biggest things I've seen is like your shot can stay the same from 3rd grade to 12th grade. You're not changing from, whatever I can do to huck it up to then develop a one-hand shot and a jump shot, and, changing your shot all the time versus having that long, slow progression of getting better at the same shot has a huge impact.
Yeah. And also, since we're talking about the philosophy, like I'm huge on 3-on-3.
Yeah.
And that's what I use as my training tool and my coaching tool, because in 5-on-5, you've got 2 girls that aren't touching the ball.
Right.
3-on-3, and they stand.
Yeah.
So you're teaching them to move, you're teaching them to think, you're teaching them to move to open space, create passing lanes.
Right.
You have the ball, you pass, you do something, you don't just stand, pass,
Right.
fill, whatever it is, take them off the dribble. And with the 3-on-3, I think they develop a higher basketball IQ. They're forced. They can't just rely on the better players. 3-on-3 is a huge thing out west. It's not such a big thing out here. Like with my nephew that I mentioned before, in the summer, and he was a, top tier basketball player in the West. In the summer, they just play on 3-on-3 tournaments.
Yeah.
They play AAU in the spring, and then they form their own team, and it's in Montana. So they might have kids from other towns, and then they just go play every weekend. They play in a regional 3-on-3 tournament.
Nice.
And they have this one tournament, I can't remember the name of it, is in Spokane, Washington, that's sponsored by Nike. It's the biggest 3-on-3 tournament in the world. I think they get a couple 100,000 participants. They completely shut down the downtown, completely shut it down. And they have it's like 300 hoops put up.
Yeah.
And if you've ever watched these 3-on-3 tournaments, one ref, it's street ball.
Yeah.
It's clawing, scratching with girls pulling hair, throwing elbows. There's like bloody noses. It's a battle.
Right.
The backboard, they don't have good equipment.
Sure.
But it's a really big thing.
Yeah.
And we don't have, I know you have a 3-on-3 league. I know like at Spartans, their most popular camp is the 3-on-3 camp. It's like, why in the heck aren't we doing that at the younger levels? Like really getting these kids involved in like that kind of stuff. The coaching is better. You're not coaching 5 kids, you're coaching 3 kids.
Right.
Easier. I think that's, yeah. And it's a lot of fun too.
It is. I think for whatever reason, there's still people frown upon it as like, it's not real basketball kind of thing. Like even their 3rd grader, like I want him to play 5-on-5 on a full height hoop on a big court. And it's like, he's standing in the corner and not touching the ball, like you're saying.
No reason.
Yeah,
no reason.
The 3-on-3 advantage of, more time on task, touching the ball more, taking more shots, and, having more space and time to operate and make decisions. Like there's not 9 people in my way. There's only 5 people in my way. I can get to the basket a little easier. And just all kinds of advantages that come out of that. So,
that's all we do with my summer training with the girls is 3-on-3.
Yeah.
And I'll even make them towards the end. We'll do full court 3-on-3 because I know it creates great like transitional situations like you'd see in a game. There's a lot of that, and the girls don't do great necessarily in transition. And I know they're going to get their work in.
Sure.
It's a track meet.
Yeah.
But it's mostly half court 3-on-3, and it's live coachable. And I think I've just seen such great progress with it.
Yeah.
And I think, I have to coach 5-on-5, when we're in our season. And I don't think it's as effective. I really don't. That's how you have to play the game, but it's a lot harder, especially if it's one coach, 10 girls on the court at one time. It's just harder to coach.
Yeah, it is. Oh, it's cool. I'm glad to hear you're using that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things.
Well, I'm a big proponent. I'd like to see it grow.
Yeah.
I'd like to see it grow. In fact, maybe this 5-on-5 summer league stuff, and we've played in summer leagues. I just think it's not good.
Yeah.
I think it should be 3-on-3 summer leagues all summer long, like they do in the West.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
I think that'd be really good. Yeah.
Well, maybe
we should talk more about that.
Over versus Greenland.
I'd love to see more of that as well.
And you need 4 players to make a team.
Right. No, it's a lot easier to coordinate and get people to show up to that. And you need less players. So next question I'd like to ask, I guess, is still on the topic of the Exeter youth basketball. Kind of, what do you see as kind of the big future for that? Like you said, you kind of stepped away from the presidency because you're working
Well, I'm
with
still the chairman.
still the
Trust me,
chairman,
I'm
Okay.
neck deep in it.
still the visionary and the coordinator, it sounds like in a lot of ways. So kind of what's your big outlook for the next few years?
Well, there's a lot of operational stuff I'm working on. That's a
Sure.
big thing with me.
Yeah.
I'm also pleased to announce that we're going to be hosting the first ever New Hampshire State Town Travel Championship tournament
Nice.
here in Exeter next winter.
Cool.
And we also work with the high school. We work with Bill Ball and Jeff Holmes.
Yeah.
And we actually worked with Coach Soak when he was the head coach there. So we actually do clinics too with the high school players, and then now we have alumni, but we had the high school players also do some reffing with us. We have a patched ref, and then we have a high school ref, because as you know too, the game needs more refs.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's really sad what's happening with refs. I mean, even like, I have a 15, my son, 14, 15-year-old kid or somebody else out there with a patched ref, reffing a fifth, 6th grade girls basketball game. And I got the fans screaming at the ref. I got the coach in the ref's face.
Yeah.
It's a 5th, 6th grade girls basketball game. Big deal.
Right.
Shut up.
Yeah.
And then the kids see that. Then the kids start arguing with the refs.
Right.
So the reason I'm bringing that up is because we see it as a holistic thing. So now that we have alumni, we're trying to get the kids back into reffing and training and working with the kids, becoming refs. And that's a good job to have. In high school, because you can ref for the rec department, you can ref for us. They get paid pretty well. You can ref in college, rec games and stuff like that. It's also for kids who really love the game. They get a better understanding of the game.
Yeah.
Keeping them busy. We also have kids that run the scoreboard and the books, and we pay the kids to do this kind of stuff. So every dime we bring in goes back to the program, goes back to the kids.
Nice.
We had our first ever alumni game last year after we graduated, the 8th grade class that had like Cole and Tyler and all those guys against Huxley and those guys, mixed the teams, and that was fantastic. And I will tell you, you can ask, talk to the high school coach, Jeff Holmes, like what we've been able to do is really having an impact on these kids.
Yeah.
Like we've got kids, we've got, there's 2 kids that are playing varsity summer league this year, and we had none last year. I mean, they're already, physically, they're 14 years old. They're not, at a senior level physically, but they can play. They've got the IQ, they've got the skill. And that is a direct credit to Exeter Youth Basketball and Scott McClure.
Yeah.
Pushing these kids, making sure they're always playing against the toughest opponents. So that's another important thing too, is like not every team is going to go down to Mohegan Sun and play against teams from New York City.
Sure.
Teams like Scott's team.
Right.
Some of them will, so parity is super important to us, because we're going to have strong teams and we're going to have teams that aren't as strong, but we're trying to get like to a point where we've got A and B teams.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily, if you're on the quote B team or 1 and 2 teams, it isn't because you can't be on the A team. Maybe you need a little bit more development at that year. Maybe it's a situation where there's too many strong players on the A team, and you would probably start on that team, but we want you to get more touches.
Right.
And even at this level, we can identify that and see that.
Yeah.
So we're growing. We finally have been established as a 501(c)(3). So we're soliciting sponsors, building a website, doing all this kind of stuff. But we do have a ceiling for our growth. And one of the biggest challenges we have now is with court space, which everybody in this area has. And I think that's a darn shame that we don't have a Connie Beam Community Center here in Exeter.
Yeah.
That we really have nothing. So court time might be holding us back a little bit.
Okay.
And then just, as far as recruitment goes, now that we're heading into our 5th year, we've had a lot of success. Summer program is, I think, really helping the girls. Like we're getting the best boys. The boys is off and running, right? But it's the girls that we really have, more aspirations for. And we also try to get a league going in this area. We've played in a league 2 seasons, Seacoast League, kind of an ad hoc thing.
Yeah.
Pretty disorganized. As you know, like AAU, pretty disorganized just in general. Some of these leagues are really disorganized. So we're actually looking to play in a league that has more depth, more divisions, so we can have more parity.
Okay.
Because I would say like last year, our 8th grade team could play anybody anywhere.
Yeah.
Any town travel team, be competitive, probably win most of the games. I think maybe they lost 2 games last year. Girls 5th and 6th grade, that's really a C team. They can't do, and them going out, when we're getting them to try to love basketball and getting beat, by 40 points by Sanborn.
Yeah.
Doesn't help.
Right. No, it's kind of the
Humiliation doesn't help.
universal
That's
problem. Like everybody's a AAU elite team, but there's a huge disparity in what that actually means. And everybody's a travel team. And so yeah, I think having the really granular breakdown of what division they should be in helps a lot.
Yeah, it really does. And so we're looking for more of that. So we're probably going to have to jump to a league in Massachusetts in order to do that. And then we have one team, you know, the kids that are going to be seventh graders that are pretty good. And they want to be more like Scott's team and play in the big AAU tournaments. They want to go to Mohegan Sun. It's going to cost a little bit more money. And that's so part of what we're doing too with the vision and being able to raise funds is we want to be able to bring in, because, you know, we think that there's a baseline that the kids should pay and the parents, because if it's free, then nobody shows up and they undervalue the experience. But we also want to be able to offset that and to be able to bring in people, you know, like you and some of the other coaches for the area to do these clinics, you know, and not have it be a financial burden on the kids, because that's something we're super, you know, sensitive to. And then also having more scholarship offers. So things that we can do to offset. And then, of course, as you know, running any kind of a youth organization, there's lots of, you know, other things you have to pay for, primarily like liability insurance and director's insurance and things like that. And that's where a lot of the costs are. But we're also hoping that this New Hampshire State Championship, you know, is going to generate some revenue and also bring, you know, more, you know, credibility to the organization we have, and help us to grow. So that's pretty much it. But there's always going to be a ceiling. Like it's not like AAU where, hey, we're going to expand to, you know, the next county over and have 500 teams or players or whatever. It's never going to be like that. You know, we want to have at the most 2 teams for each level. And, you know, getting back to your point too, like, you know, where a kid is at in 5th grade, where I was at in 8th grade did not determine where I was at when I was a senior in high school.
Yeah.
You know, and so you got to give kids a chance. You know, they're developing at different, you know, rates, maturing at different rates. Some kid just might get a bug and they just might grind all summer. And then all of a sudden they come back and, you know, they're better than everybody else. Like, you know, kids need that runway, I think.
Right.
So we're doing the best we can to support that.
That's great.
But also not overreaching. I think that's a problem that some of the programs have is the overreach, is that maybe there's some programs that don't need to run year round. You know what I'm saying? Because I think it's healthy for kids, specifically with AAU. Like, personal opinion, I don't think anybody should be playing AAU year round. I don't think it's healthy at all. And the kind of coaches, and now we have AAU coaches that are telling these kids in 5th and 6th grade, you have to play year round or you're not going to make the A team next season, or you're not going to get a D1 scholarship. But talking to kids in 5th and 6th grade about D1 scholarships, putting that level of pressure on them, I think that is not the kind of mentoringship that's going to get you across the finish line, in my opinion. And
it contributes more to the burnout of the pressure is too high and it's no longer fun, I'm going to quit, than it does to anything productive, in my experience.
Absolutely. And I tell that to kids all the time. It's like, hey, you're a soccer player, go play soccer, because footwork, like, there's so many transferable skills. Go play soccer. Huxley had a coach that told him, like, you want to make, you know, he wanted to make JV last year as a freshman. He goes, then you need to be in as good a shape as possible. Go run cross country. I know you're going to hate it. You're not very fast, but you're going to get in better shape. While you're playing fall ball, you know, and he did that. And, you know, that's awesome. Right. Something else, you know, that cross training, like, that actually makes you a better player, not a worse player.
Right. Oh, that's great. So we're running up against the hour time. I want to hit you with 3 more questions, kind of go lightning round approach. First one is, what has worked well for you as a coach and a parent? Like, best of the best tactics, concepts, methods you found across your experience.
A lot of it I already talked about, but I think that the most important thing a coach can have, 2 most important things are patience and empathy. I've always had the empathy. I've started 3 nonprofit organizations in my career. You know, so that's not patting myself on the back, but that's something I've always had, but the patience is something I haven't. And just, you know, in my corporate professional world, I found that, you know, coaching kids and the patience and the empathy and the perseverance, sticking with a kid, and the little victories have really helped me to be better in my professional career. So those things, you know, working on those skills that you don't have through the team, I think is really good. But everybody's got to have empathy. You know, you got to really believe in these kids. I talked about some of the tactics before. I think 3-on-3 works great. One of the things that we do with girls that's different than the boys is we talk a lot. The girls like that. That's part of the bonding thing. They seem to be a little bit more insular. It brings them out. They're a little bit more cliquish. We're all insecure. The boys just want to show off. The girls are just self-conscious, you know, just sweeping statement. So that really, really helps. And it's part of it too. It's like you're sitting there for 20 minutes talking. Like, how does that help the kids be a better player? Well, it helps them to connect. They've got stuff on their mind. It helps them to be heard.
Yeah.
You know, and you see that a lot with coaches where the coaches are just talking. They love the sounds of their own voice, but they're just talking.
Yeah.
So I think being heard is super important. And I think that works. You know, and kids might have stuff going on. Right. You know, and they're maybe not going to tell you about it. I've had that happen so many times with kids that, you know, they're out there busting it, you know, and they're really emotional and they're crying if they turn the ball over, or they get pulled or whatever, you know, these are younger kids. Then the parent comes up and says, you know what, his heel's been really hurting and he probably shouldn't even be playing. But he insisted on playing. It's like, okay, right. I get all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's usually something going on behind the scenes, right?
A lot of times there is, and you know, so that's why I think just that listening is a really powerful thing. One of my favorite people of all time, and definitely my favorite coach in any sport, is John Wooden. Yeah, and I'm also a big Bill Walton fan, which is kind of controversial with some people because I know don't really get it with Bill Walton. But his whole thing is like, you know, he didn't talk. And the screaming and yelling doesn't work. Screaming and yelling, berating does not work on any kid. They freeze up. They're not going to do what you want them to do. Doesn't work. Positive reinforcement. You have to hold them accountable. If they miss a shot or they do something, you'd be like, hey, you know what? I know you know better than that. So next time, but don't berate them. Yeah. They have enough pressure on them. But with Bill Walton, he told the story about how John Wooden, it's like, never yelled at games, never even really drew anything up. Cause he's like, you know, that's your job. My job was to coach you in practice. Yeah. Scream and yell. I've given you the tools. Now you got to go execute. That's on you. And greatest coach of all time in college basketball and one of the best people ever. Right. I think
that's a huge concept. A lot of coaches could do well to study just that idea of my work is done in practice and the game is up to the players, and giving them some guidance during the competitive pressure.
Well, let me just say one more thing about John Wooden. And, you know, if anybody's listening to this and you're interested in coaching, read John Wooden's. He's got a great book of life. It's like the greatest Father's Day gift. Like, you know, it's such a treasure. But I told you that little anecdote about my high school coach who basically, okay, here's also what's interesting about my high school coach is Judd Heathcote was his coach, right? So then he went to Michigan State, and a couple years later, Judd Heathcote did, and he's like a Hall of Fame coach. My coach, Eric Hayes, went to be a graduate assistant at Michigan State, and guess who he recruited? Irvin Magic Johnson.
Okay, yeah, wow.
Okay, so I told you about this great game that my coach had against John Wooden's team, right?
Yeah.
After the game, Eric Hayes is a nobody, right? John Wooden, greatest coach of all time, hadn't lost a game, and they won the championship that year. Course, wrote Eric a 3-page letter, got his address about what he learned from him on the court, about the David versus Goliath, and you know, all of this strength of character. He didn't have to do that.
Sure.
Why would he even care? Like this is the opening round of the tournament. Yeah. Guy that's never going to play pro basketball. Sure. And they kept up a relationship for 30 years. And Eric told this story about, it was actually in our hometown paper, where he went down to Westwood and with his family. He had 2 daughters and a son. Looked up John Wested. John Wooden. He's living in an apartment in Westwood. John Wooden spends the whole day with the family. Wow. Went around taking him to UCLA, just everything. Like that's the kind of guy he was. Yeah. Like we need more of that. Yeah. You know, that's empathy. That's humility. Yeah. You know, that's strength. You know, and when you read, you know, with like Bill Walton, when he talks about character. He wasn't so much a basketball coach, he was a character coach. Right. You know? Okay. And what were the other questions? Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's all right. You got a long list going. Yeah. What has not worked well for you? What have you seen that you would advise people against?
Well, like I said, the screaming and the yelling and the berating and humiliating and winning at any cost.
Hmm.
You know, I'm a big believer in, like, you know, we're not with equal playing time. You got to earn it. I always say that.
Yeah.
And we're playing to win. But, you know, yanking a kid, here's one thing that doesn't work: yanking a kid off the court when they make one mistake.
Yeah. I see
That
that
does,
as
that just
one of the
destroys them.
single biggest confidence killers. Like, they're out there trying to do their best, and every time they make a mistake, they get yanked out of the game. It's
And they're a kid. And I always
They
tell them,
won't.
it's like, I don't care that you made a mistake. What I care about is that you hung your head, you moped,
yeah,
you know, and you didn't go make a play on the other end of the court. I'm like, shake it off.
yeah,
You know, I think that those things, yeah, definitely, anything negative doesn't work.
yeah. I totally agree. I think that's great. All right, final question is, kind of leave us with, what is your advice to parents that are, coming along? They're probably in that 3rd to 8th grade, and their kid likes basketball, and they're trying to figure out what their path should be to try to, navigate the basketball journey that we're all on at some point.
Well, that's a big range, 3rd to 8th. And
Yeah.
with the younger kids, I would say experiment. Try some different things, try some different coaches. Like, if you're going to do that kind of a thing, not everybody can afford it. And it's like, look, coaches have to make a living too. Trainers have to make a living. They can't do it for free. Court time's expensive. There's all these things you have to understand.
Mhm.
But not everybody is a good fit with every coach. So I think experimentation until you find something that works for you and your kid,
Yeah.
I think is a good idea. I think when they get older, I think consistency is important. I know my son moved around a lot, played in a lot of different basketball programs, and kind of had to. But when you get, into high school, you shouldn't be moving. I don't think it's conducive. I think that because there's from what I've seen, there's kind of some ingrained politics and some loyalty factors that are really, really hard to overcome.
Yeah.
I think, like I said before, I think don't just hang your hat on one hook with the kid. I think, again, I think being a multi-sport athlete, if they're athletic, I think is healthy.
Yeah.
I think another thing I would say too is, like, hey, I always give everybody, like, I encourage kids to play AAU. And most kids, look, if they're in our program, they want to get better and they're going to continue. I think that they probably need to have an experience in AAU, just to know what it's like. I think it's healthy for them to see kids their age that are super skilled, not to get beat by 50 points, but I think it's good to see, like, hey, there's really good kids out here. Guess how they got better? They worked at it.
Yeah.
So I do encourage that, but not with their blinders on. And I tell them too, like, take it easy. You don't get all over your kid if they miss a free throw to lose a 5th grade game.
Yeah.
There's gonna be a lot of games.
Sure.
And I also tell parents, and I tell kids that, like, failure is part of the formula for success. So don't lose it over one game.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a lot of games, and you always have the opportunity to learn from it and to get better.
Yeah.
I think that those are important things, and to take breaks. I think that there's a lot of pressure on kids.
Yeah.
And we're just talking about sports here. We're not talking about COVID stuff. We're not talking about social media. We're not talking about crazy stuff happening in the world, geopolitics and with the weather and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So kids got a lot on them. But again, circling back to sports, why it's so good for sports is put down. I always tell this to kids. It's like, put down the phone and TikTok, and that 30 minutes you would be wasting your time, go dribble. You will be better for it. I use that analogy a lot because, I just see way too much wasted time. The first thing most of the older kids do who have phones, they start getting phones in middle school for safety purposes, is what the parents always say, my wife included. Is that first thing they do, practice is over, they pick up their darn phone.
Yeah.
Why? What do you think you just missed in an hour and a half? That's so important.
Instant. Yeah.
But of course, parents do it all the time too. But it's
Right.
just like, how do we?
That's what I look at too. It's kind of modeled by parents. I know I do it myself. My 4-year-old will grab his iPad any chance he gets. But I think it's great advice to just take 30 minutes as a mental break, if nothing else. Like, go dribble, go shoot in the driveway, and like think about nothing else but that one thing for a time. I think the
Yep.
mental clarity and just relief that comes from that as a habit is really valuable.
Yep.
Well, this has been fantastic, Howard. I appreciate you coming on and answering all my questions. It's fun to hear your whole very colorful story across all the different things you've been involved in here.
Well, thanks for hearing me out. It's something that I'd never honestly thought about before.
Yeah.
You know, so it kind of got me thinking a little bit, and I did want to come to this, you know, maybe a little bit more spontaneous.
Yeah.
I generally don't like to prepare for things like this because I don't want a canned response. I want it to be from the heart.
Sure. Well, I appreciate it. It's been a great story.
Okay, thanks, BJ. Appreciate it.
Have a great day.
Have a great summer.
You
See you
too.
soon. Bye.